So let's talk about inheritance. Here's the syllabus objectives. One of the ways we can study crosses in humans is by looking at pedigrees. Now, you don't need to create pedigrees, but you do need to interpret them. Pedigrees are really helpful because they show the genetic relationship among individuals in a family. They show each person's sex and also shows them the phenotype for the trait being studied. If we're looking at a pedigree for a single gene trait, then the pedigree is able to help us determine whether it's a dominant or recessive allele and whether it's sex-linked or whether it's an autosome. So let's have a look at some examples. So here's a pedigree, and you can see here there's a key down here. So the squares and the circles, where there's no circles here that are coloured in, but the ones that are coloured in means that they're affected, or they actually have that phenotype. So it might be that we're studying something like haemophilia, PKU, or it might be red hair. But whatever the phenotype is that we're talking about, these are the ones who express it, and these are the ones that don't. Now, male is square, female is a circle, and this line here shows the mating of a male and a female, and down here shows their offspring. So these are the offspring, these three, and these are the partners in which they've mated with. And then every generation is on a line. So we start at the top and we work our way down. So we can look at different inheritance patterns. We can look at whether it's on an autosome, so the somatic non-sex chromosomes, the autosomes. We're looking at if it's dominant or recessive, and we can have a look at and see if it's on the sex chromosome. Is it X-linked dominant? Is it X-linked recessive? Or is it Y-linked, which is really quite rare. So these are the things we should be able to look at. So let's go through it. All right, so autosomal recessive traits. This is like PKU or cystic fibrosis or albinoism or albinism that we talked about before, and sickle cell disease, which we've talked about as well. Individuals with a trait must be homozygous for the recessive allele. Recessive phenotype can only be present when both parents have the recessive allele. So these parents must be carriers. So this is a clue for us when we're looking at a pedigree. So if we see that the parents don't have the disorder, the child does, that's a way of telling us that it's probably autosomal recessive because both of the parents were carriers. So this is an example for cystic fibrosis. Now, in red here is the genotypes that we're sure about. So these people are males and these are affected. So we know that they are homozygous recessive, lowercase c, lowercase c. We know for sure that the parents of these offspring are carriers. They're heterozygous because they both have to have provided a lowercase c to the offspring. So we can say for sure that the parents of all of these offspring are heterozygous. So what else can we say? This person has had children, and they were, we know, homozygous. We can be sure that we can't be sure that this female parent isn't a carrier, but we can be sure that these children or these offspring are carriers because they got the lowercase c from their dad, but they don't have the condition, so they must be heterozygous. Okay, so we can do a little bit of detective work by working through what we know. Sometimes we don't know everything, so we have to say, well, it's either that or that. And I haven't done all of them because sometimes we're not actually sure, but it can be really quite helpful. Okay, so autosomal recessive, we will see that we will see this sort of arrangement here. It could be male or female, of course, normally in equal ratios, but you'll see that the parents generally don't have the condition, but we know that they're carriers. Autosomal dominant It's expressed when at least one of the dominant alleles are present. So it could be heterozygous or homozygous dominant. Here's two examples, Huntington's and also achondroplasia, sometimes called dwarfism. And so what we're going to see is that our clue is that an affected individual will always have at least one affected parent. Okay, so there's no option here if we've got a parent who's affected, the offspring are going to be affected. They have to be affected. So here's an example here. So you can see that both males and females are affected. It doesn't skip generations like we saw with the recessive. And so you can see more. So whenever we have a parent that has the disorder or has the trait, we always see it in the offspring. Okay, a parent's got the trait, we always see it in the offspring. Okay, so now let's have a look at the sex-linked recessive. So there's a different way that we express the genotype with our sex-linked as well. We actually, we use X and Y for the actual chromosome, and we do a superscript letter for whether it's for the actual trait that we're looking at, and it's uppercase, of course, for dominant, and lowercase for recessive. But importantly, we actually do the chromosome, so the X or the Y. Okay, so we're talking about sex-linked recessive. So we're talking about X-linked recessive. So it's a gene that's on the X chromosome. For a female to have that phenotype, they need to be homozygous recessive. Males are hemizygous. They've only got the one allele. So if it's present, it's going to be expressed. So for that reason, it's going to be much more common in males. Here's some examples: hemophilia and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So the clue, we see more males than females affected. Females will only be affected if their father was also affected. So I've just put a clue here. You're going to see the shaded in square for the males, far more than females. So here's an example here, and this is for haemophilia, and this is actually the British royal family, because they have haemophilia in their family. So if we scan through, we can see it's only the males that are affected. Here it does actually show you who the carriers are, and the carriers are illustrated by colouring in half of the circle. Okay, so sex-linked dominant traits, these are quite rare. What we're going to see here is that the affected fathers will have affected daughters. So let's see if we can see this. So this is an affected father. See how we express it with the X and Y. And this is the dominant allele here. And we can see that the daughters are affected. So that's an example here we can see. Now the daughter is heterozygous because the mother was not affected, but the daughter is still affected because it is because it's dominant. We don't see unaffected carrier females because it's dominant. Here's an example here, though, that the mother actually has the disorder and the father is hemizygous recessive. And so we can see that it's expressed with these two children who have the capital A, one male, one female, and they're both affected. This child, these two offspring, by chance didn't have it because they had both the, so this person was homozygous recessive and this person was hemizygous recessive. Okay, so last thing, the very last thing. So how do we know if it's sex-linked or autosomal? If traits are equally male and female, it's likely autosomal. If there's more males, it's likely X-linked. Recessive X-linked usually skips generations. Also, we see recessive autosomal often skips generations as well. X-linked dominant traits rarely skip generations. Best thing you can do is try and test each of them to determine the mode of inheritance. Try all inheritance patterns and see which one fits. There's your syllabus objectives. Press pause and make sure you can understand all of those. And here's the guidance.